You may think that the horrors of Little Nightmares are just another grotesque creature in another creepy horror game, but they aren't what you think. Because when you begin to look deeper, you realise that the horror isn't just about the monsters. The game holds up a mirror and confronts us with the vices that plague our modern world. These monsters convey subjects such as our insatiable appetite for more, our addiction to technology, the soulless efficiency of mass production, and neglect for the elderly. These aren't just monsters that chase you, they're things we live with, things we see every day, but either do not notice, or unconsciously or maybe even deliberately choose to ignore. That ends now. Because today, dear viewer, we're not just looking at scary monsters, we're diving into the world of Little Nightmares and childhood trauma to break down what the characters really represent, and why Little Nightmares might be hiding one of gaming's sharpest critiques of modern society, disguised as a horror platformer. But first, a few disclaimers. First, there will be spoilers, so fair warning. 2, these are just theories and my interpretations, they're not facts, feel free to contribute your own in the comments. And third, I made the artworks, it's not AI. Let's begin with a little bit of lore first. So Little Nightmares is a dark, atmospheric puzzle platformer set in a universe shaped by distorted childhood fears called the Nowhere. Part 1 gave us the raincoat-clad Six and the Maw. Part 2 gave us the bag-wearing Mono and the Pale City. Both protagonists have to navigate a perilous, unforgiving environment as well as towering hostile figures. But beneath its silent, wordless storytelling lies a layered critique of our own world, consumerism, loss of innocence, and cycles of power and corruption. Through its, at times, disturbing imagery, Little Nightmares invites us to confront not just monsters, but the ideas they represent. We start with Little Nightmares 1. At its heart, the game follows the previously mentioned character, Six, trapped in a grim, mysterious place called the Maw, a massive vessel built to cater to gluttonous guests, with an endless grotesque feast. Honestly, it's not too dissimilar to a modern-day mukbang. The Maw, though, isn't just a setting, it's a symbol, a floating prison and feasting ground, representing gluttony and systemic consumption. Guests arrive with insatiable appetites, endlessly devouring without satisfaction. Every area from the prison depths to the kitchens to the dining halls emphasizes excess and inescapable consumption. It's heavily implied that children are a food source in the Maw. We see children in beds being taken away by the janitor, more on him soon, who then bundles them up in rags and sends them off to the kitchen. We later see these bundles being cut up or put through an industrial mincer. It's possible even the adults are recycled, fed back into the system to sustain the next wave of guests. Once consumption begins, it never ends. It's a disturbingly sharp reflection of our own world, never content, always wanting more, always craving what's newer, faster, easier. Releasing a new iPhone every year with incrementally better features comes to mind. Now, some children do manage to escape the processing line, but their fate is hardly a happy one. Those who aren't drained by the leeches, devoured by unseen horrors, or turned into shadowy echoes of themselves, may instead become Nomes. The Secrets of the Maw DLC pretty much confirms this when the runaway kid, the DLC protagonist, encounters the lady, the main antagonist, and she appears to turn him into a gnome. A sad fate for children escaping the butcher's block, only to lose their humanity in another way. Even in freedom, they remain fragile scavengers living in the cracks of the Maw, at the mercy of those who dominate it. The gnomes stand as a haunting symbol of how the weak survive, not with dignity or power, but on the scraps and whims of the strong. Moving on to the main villains, let's start with Six. Now, you might think it's strange to refer to the protagonist as a villain, but by the end of the first game, Six occupies a morally grey space. You could even see her as an antagonist, and by the end of the second game, more on that later. Six is a small girl in a yellow coat navigating an adult world shaped by greed and industrialization. Her journey through the Maw is both a literal escape and a symbolic descent into corruption. As she progresses, she begins to fall under the influence of the Maw, incorporating its values and her crippling hunger becoming impossible to ignore. Satisfying her hunger isn't optional, it's mandatory. As players, we have no choice but to feed her, and what she eats marks her gradual fall, because her appetite only grows as we progress, constantly needing to up the ante to satiate. It starts off with some bread, I think, given to her by another child, then raw meat found in a cage used as bait, then a live rat caught in a trap, then a live gnome who offered her food, and finally the lady herself, the main antagonist. Also, and this is really sad, the gnome she eats, well, it's implied that gnome is the converted runaway kid from the DLC who was caught and turned into a gnome by the lady. just another child trying to escape, become victim. You could see this as a symbol for how we are always needing to feed our minds with something better, bigger, more exciting, something that is going to give us the next hit, something that will take us to the next level, because familiarity quickly becomes stale and unstimulating. Back to 6. By the end of the game, after consuming the lady's essence, 6 turns on God mode and gains a dark power that lets her kill the very guests who once saw her as prey a short while ago. But she isn't their victim anymore. 6 has become part of the system, a predator, fully absorbed into the Moore's cycle. You can even see this darkness leaving the guests, absorbed into 6. She's taking back the power they once had over her, and holy I mean, she just swaggers past these things and they all just drop dead. Next, the Janitor, a thin, hunched figure with long, rubbery arms and a peeled, unsettling face, kind of like a messed up Mr. Tickles. In the game, the Janitor patrols the Moore's early areas, and is one of the antagonists in the DLC. He uses his well-attuned hearing to listen out for subtle clues as to where those pesky runaway children might be hiding. A creaking floorboard, the kicking of coals, bottles being knocked over before those stretching, all-reaching arms will reach into every crevice to snatch up whatever created it, including 6. We never see him eat or show emotion. Instead, he watches over the children and captures any that try to make an escape. When the children are called upon, the Janitor wraps them up in rags like a morbid parcel and sends them off to the kitchen to be processed, more likely than not into food. His entire purpose is a single, soulless task, a metaphor for blind labour and control. The Janitor stands for oppressive systems, authority that blindly enforces control without empathy or understanding. He doesn't need eyes, he just needs to listen and obey. His constant, aimless groping reflects how systems of power can reach into every corner of life. On a more personal level, the Janitor embodies literal childhood fears. The monster under the bed, the hands reaching from the dark, the dread of being caught and punished. Ultimately, 6 defeats the Janitor by slamming a door on him and severing his arms, cutting off his reach both literally and symbolically. Now the chefs, short, masked figures haunting the Moore's kitchens. These 2 exist only to feed the guests, endlessly preparing grotesque meals in a very unsanitary kitchen that I'm sure even the dirtiest restaurants in the grossiest basement would trump when it comes to cleanliness. I mean, just check out this guy over here just hacking his guts up. Their cooking isn't about craft or a labour of love, it's about volume, efficiency, turning sustenance into excess. If they spot 6, they'll chase her down, and if they catch her, they'll toss her into the oven, or straight into a bubbling pot, or apparently stuff her inside a fish. She's just another ingredient for the next meal. The chefs represent industrial food production, factory farming, mass catering, the cold, mechanical side of feeding consumer demand. Where the food is sourced, be it livestock or in this case imprisoned children, it's irrelevant. They embody the labour class of the Moor, faceless workers who keep the system running. Also, where did he just put that cheese? Then there are the guests, enormous bloated figures with stubby arms and vacant faces, mindlessly gorging themselves without pause. If they spot 6, they'll stampede after her, climbing over each other in a frenzy, completely indifferent to their own safety. And if they catch her, they'll eat her, just nom, straight in, gone. Unlike the Janitor or the chefs, the guests aren't part of the Moore's machinery, they are its reason for existing. They come aboard seemingly by choice, but once inside, they can't stop consuming and they never leave. The guests are a clear symbol of unchecked gluttony and consumerism. Dressed in expensive-looking clothes, some even wearing painted masks, they hint at wealth and social status, suggesting the privileged class's ability to overconsume without consequences. Yet beneath that appearance, they have no individuality, they're just pure appetite, driven beyond necessity, empathy, or even self-preservation. Because during 6's escape, some guests are so obsessed with catching her that they even throw themselves to their deaths. Finally, we meet the Lady, the last villain and the final boss of the first game. Unlike the grotesque figures we've seen, the Lady is elegant, slender, poised and stylized. The Lady rules them all, but exists apart from its endless consumption. Her vice isn't gluttony, it's, I think, vanity and control. Her quarters are filled with shattered mirrors and beauty products, suggesting a desperate, unfulfilled obsession with her appearance. She may suffer from body dysmorphia or an awareness of her own monstrous nature beneath the mask she wears. That mask could be literal or symbolic, a facade to hide her true ugliness. While the guests gorge openly, the lady cloaks her darkness in grace and control, but in the end, both lead to the same place: isolation. The lady embodies hidden, internal corruption. Where the guests consume publicly, she hides her flaws behind ritual and appearance. In the DLC, her character is expanded by showing another living area filled with dolls and statues of herself. In the same room as these dolls, we can see the lady actually holding and stroking one of them, like a mother might cradle her baby. She's even humming her theme tune to it, which in this context sounds like a lullaby. Alongside this, we encounter ghostly shadow children that have masked faces like her own, and possess a similar power to drain the life energy out of people. Perhaps these shadow children and the dolls in her quarters are connected, representing the children she had and lost, or wanted in another life. Maybe it's a reflection of her guilt for all those children trapped in the orphanage. Maybe, on the topic of mirrors and reflection, the shadow children are an unsightly reflection of the more polished, idealized image of children that the lady surrounds herself with. Or perhaps instead they are related to the Ashes to Ashes secret achievement, where we find an urn of children's ashes in a secret area in the lady's study, accompanied by a painting that appears to show faces burning in fire. Maybe they are the ghosts of those children. Maybe that in turn relates to the children in the orphanage who get turned to stone in the main game when the eye catches them. Or perhaps I'm thinking too much into it, and there is no greater meaning to the shadow children. Even the game's writer said, quote, "They're nobody in particular. Just like all children, they're forever being left behind. And just like all shadows, they're difficult to escape." We also see the lady without a mask in the DLC, and yeah, we can see why she wears one. If the pain and guilt of what she has done over the years does in fact manifest as her disfigurement, the years have not been kind. And as I said back in the gnome part of the video, we're also shown that it is she who turns runaway children into gnomes. Ultimately, Six defeats the lady not just through force, but by forcing her to confront herself, using mirrors as both a literal and symbolic weapon. When the lady is finally reduced to a weakened shell, Six consumes her, absorbing her power and completing her own transformation. By taking in the lady's energy, Six escapes the Maw, becoming the new apex of its cycle. A few honorary mentions go first to the Leeches that lurk in the darkest, dampest parts of the Maw. They'll pull themselves toward you, wrap around you like a snake, and then suck the life out of you. In a rather terrifying twist, there is some concept art, and even some existing game files, that show an early idea for these creatures featuring legs, evidently an idea that was later abandoned. The Leeches can represent many things. The parasitic nature of a leech leads it to drain the life from living creatures. In the context of the game, it could symbolize the systems around us that drain the life and childhood innocence out of us as we adventure through the world. It could also present the lowest rung in the Maw's hierarchy of consumption. The elite are at the top, with an endless chef-prepared buffet, but here at the bottom, they consume scraps, leftovers, and the weak, making them a grim reflection of how in systems of greed, nothing goes to waste, everything gets consumed, even the discarded. Given that we see fewer and fewer leeches as we climb up the Maw, I'm leaning towards this theory. They're not just pests, they're a warning that even at the bottom, consumption still rules. Second, the shoe monster, who we only see very briefly. Interestingly, we never see the creature, only the ripples of movement it creates beneath the discarded shoes as it chases us down. From a literal point of view, you could say it symbolizes unseen horrors and the terror of a small child, being in an environment they cannot fully perceive. But when you consider the mountain of shoes, the symbolism deepens. Every pair once belonged to someone. They're all that remains of those who came to the Maw to indulge in endless consumption and never left. The shoe monster then could be seen as the lingering manifestation of that gluttony, a creature born from what's left behind, still hungry, still pursuing Six. And finally we come to the Granny, an often overlooked character from the DLC. She's a grim sight to behold, waterlogged, wrinkled skin, sagging features, you get the idea. Living at the very bottom of the Maw, hidden away in the foul bilges, the Granny represents the elderly in a consumerist society. She no longer fits into the picture, no longer has value, and so she's left to rot in the depths, unseen, unneeded. Even her environment reflects her lack of status. while the rest of the moor is kept just functional enough to indulge the gluttonous guests. With seating, beds and lighting, the granny's world is filthy, broken and forgotten. A stark reflection of how we often treat the elderly in our own world, hidden away in nursing homes to ease the burden of care, or worse, simply abandoned to waste away. Little Nightmares 2 builds upon the themes from the first game, but shifts gears slightly. While the first game explored gluttony, consumption and vanity, the second looks into systems of control and cycles of trauma. I've seen a fair bit of discussion suggesting it's a metaphor for how mass media, the eternal march of technology, and figures of authority can distort what we perceive, suppress our individuality, and perpetuate cycles of abuse and control. While 6 makes a return in the second game, the main protagonist is a boy called Mono, and poor Mono has a tough time of it. But before we start looking at the villains, there is a very important construct in this game we need to familiarise ourselves with first: the Signal Tower. The Signal Tower is a monolithic, looming building in this game that periodically outputs a pervasive transmission, distorting reality and controlling the inhabitants of Pale City, the place where the game is mostly set. Given the themes of the second game, we can safely conclude that the Signal Tower represents the mass media and technology's pervasive influence. Just think of how algorithms peddle content that reinforces our own biases. Whether you fall on the left or right of politics, you'll both gravitate towards and be fed information that reinforces your position. It's a metaphor for how constant exposure to mass media and technology can distort perception, create dependency, and erode individuality. It also represents a form of psychological control, using our own traumas against us to turn us into something worse. In-game, for example, it turns 6 into a monster and leads Mono towards his haunting fate. The Signal Tower symbolises the root of corruption in this universe, a void that creates instability, unreality, and feeds on fear, loss, and helplessness. Now let's move on to the villains, and we start with Mono. Now, just like before, those who haven't played the games might be wondering how the protagonist can be a villain, and again, the answer lies in the message the game is trying to convey and their morally grey character. Mono is this paper bag wearing child, and his entire purpose and drive in this game is to escape and reject systems of control and figures of authority. Mono is a lonely character. Even the word mono refers to one. In mono audio you only have one channel, with monochromatic you only have one colour. Mono starts his journey alone, he then finds 6, who he later loses, and he ends the game as he started, alone. Even the bag he wears to hide his face could arguably be another method of showcasing his anonymity and lack of individuality. There is no emotion or face to put to him, he is just one, until he accepts his fate at the end, that is. Sadly, as Mono progresses through the game, he slowly begins to lose himself to the very systems he is trying to resist. Ultimately, he reaches the Signal Tower, where it is revealed that Mono is a younger version of the Thin Man, the central antagonist of the game. This creates a time loop. He is then trapped alone and isolated in the tower, where years of exposure to the tower's corruptive influence turn him into the Thin Man, fully grown and steeped in the corruption of the media he wanted to avoid. It's actually really sad when you stop and think about it. His transformation into the Thin Man illustrates a total loss to the system he was fighting, a cycle that mirrors real-world struggles with systemic control, mass media influence, and technology becoming an ever more crucial component of our society. Mono's struggle against overwhelming external control and trauma ultimately represents how cycles of abuse and loss of identity can transform even the innocent into agents of the very system they once resisted. Just think of the countless number of users online with little more than a string of letters and numbers for usernames, pushing the same narratives you've heard 100 times elsewhere. We all become puppets to the system to some degree in the end. Let's take a look at the Hunter, found living in a forest filled with all manner of traps such as this, and this, and this. The Hunter is the first and rather short-lived villain we come across, who hunts Mono and 6 through the woods with a rifle. Also, real quick, part 2 takes place before part 1, so 6 hasn't got her signature yellow raincoat yet. The Hunter is this large, imposing figure with a sack over his head, wearing typical hunting gear. A lot of the imagery from inside his hut suggests he is proficient in taxidermy, such as the pelts, the traps, and the fact you can see him ripping some poor thing's guts out. I've also seen some speculation that he might be hunting something worse than Bambi's mum, what with 6 being stuck in a cage, but the game leaves that vague. While the hunter lives outside of Pale City and so the influence of the signal tower is near absent compared to within it, he already shows how control and predation exist even outside its immediate reach. The hunter embodies a predatory authoritarian adult figure from the perspective of a child. His obsession with taxidermy could be interpreted as seeing living things as little more than objects or trophies. Naturally, with Mono being so opposed to systems of control, this ultimate loss of agency and autonomy, being strung up on a wall, is something he fundamentally rejects. The hunter also represents the loss of innocence, because for Mono and Six to escape him, they are both forced to kill the hunter with his own rifle. This moment marks Mono's and Six's first major step towards moral compromise, something the system is only too happy to nurture. Next, Six, the protagonist from the first game, makes a return in this one. And as I said, the events of Little Nightmares 2 happened before the first game, so this is before she went god mode after eating the lady and killed a load of people. She is our friendly companion for most of the game, helping us solve puzzles, but as the story progresses and she is put through her own trials and tribulations, hints of a darker nature begin to emerge. During the school section, Six is captured and strung up by the porcelain children. Mono then frees her, and not too long later, we watch her smash one of the children's heads into the floor. In the hospital chapter, we come across Six breaking a mannequin's fingers. Later in the same chapter, she incinerates the doctor and warms her hands by the fire, and then at the end, she drops Mono off a ledge instead of saving him. The story of Six's ultimate end and her betrayal of Mono is linked to a music box she carries, which is a symbol of her innocence and a source of comfort. By the end of the game, Six transforms into a monster, her attachment to the music box being twisted through the tower's influence. Mono is then forced to destroy the music box to disconnect the tower's control on Six, but in doing so, contributes to Six's transformation into a cold survivor. A catch-22 for Mono if you like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. By destroying the symbol of her innocence and comfort, Six becomes emotionally detached. It shows how trauma can force a person to shut down in order to survive. This is clearly shown later on when Six betrays Mono, leaving him to his fate. And honestly, this sent me when I first saw it. I had grown so attached to Six from the first game, and to then watch her drop my boy Mono like that after he had tried to save her? Not cool. I understand it, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. This betrayal suggests that her earlier sense of trust and empathy has now been replaced by self-preservation and mistrust. Her actions reinforce the game's core theme, that cycles of control and harm repeat themselves. Just as Mono becomes the Thin Man, Six becomes the survivor seen in Little Nightmares 1, marked by mistrust and violence. It suggests that survival in this world often comes at the cost of becoming something monstrous in the process. Touching back to the first game, some of the events make a lot more sense knowing what we know now. Six's distrust for anyone and that self-preservation is most clearly seen when she consumes the gnome that offers her a sausage. But with that being said, there are still hints of her humanity, such as when she hugs them. Maybe a piece of what she once was is still in there somewhere. Next up, the teacher with the noodle neck. She appears inside the school section of the game and uses this snake-like neck feature to explore all the nooks and crannies of the school, looking for errant children to put back in line. Instead of violence, she uses silent menace as her method of enforcing order. Quite obviously, she represents another figure of authority, but rather than the personal predation of the hunter, she is part of the school, which represents institutionalized control. She values obedience and conformity over individualism. Adults are already scary enough for a child, let alone being forced to be in the presence of a stranger with authoritarian powers. I think all of us can sympathize with Mono here. How many of us had overbearing and outright intimidating teachers during our education? When I was in school, I had a science teacher that once grabbed the back of my neck and threatened to put me through a wall. A charming man. I heard he got suspended a few years after I left. The school itself is a grimy, decrepit place laden with systems of control, and just like the forest, it also features its fair share of annoying traps such as this, and this, and especially this. It is populated with porcelain-faced children that act as extensions of the teacher's influence, trying to capture and restrain Mono. The porcelain children can be seen as victims of the control, broken, hollow, yet still acting in line with her rules. Their hollow heads suggest fragility and emptiness stripped of thought or will. The teacher is a nightmare version of a strict, unkind one. Her long neck and never blinking eyes are the literal manifestation of a teacher who is always watching. The type you fear will always be there when you don't want them to, the one where you see them at the end of the school corridor and it sends a shiver down your spine. Normally, a school is meant to nurture growth, but the teacher's environment does the opposite. It suppresses freedom and personality. This ties into the larger theme of Little Nightmares 2, where systems meant to help children actually end up hurting them. Moving on, the Doctor, and this is certainly a medical practitioner you wouldn't want to be your point of call. An obese man with a disturbingly ugly face. He likes to crawl around on the ceilings of the dilapidated hospital he inhabits, filled with broken medical equipment, the odd limb here and there, and unfinished mannequins. We also come across these masks in one of his rooms. If you look carefully, you can clearly see the faces of the janitor, the chefs, and even some of the guests from the first game. I mean, you could clearly see those weren't their actual faces. You even see the chef lift off his face at one point. It would suggest to me that the Doctor is the one making the masks for those individuals. Back to the Doctor and his mannequins, which are everywhere, it's implied the Doctor creates these mannequins. We in fact see him pulling one apart and building another. Oh, and they can move too. But they can only move while unobserved and in darkness, facilitating the need for Mono to consistently shine a light on them to navigate the areas they are found. The mannequin suggests this Doctor without limits is forever trying to fix and perfect things, despite the horrific consequences. This ties into the broader theme of control. The mannequins represent a loss of identity, conformity, and dependence on the system. Their facelessness and sheer numbers perfectly reflect the modern human condition. Billions of us, but how much individuality do we truly have? We follow the same trends, consume the same content, crave the same things, and their unsettling ability to move only in darkness reflects how systems of control thrive in ignorance and shadow. But the moment you shine a light on them, when awareness and truth expose what's really happening, they freeze, powerless. The Doctor represents a fear of unchecked medical authority, surgeons or doctors who experiment without ethics or empathy, and to some degree, a child's fear of doctors as a whole, possibly reinforced by the Doctor's appearance, similar to a spider, crawling along the walls and ceiling with surprising agility. His grotesque experiments have resulted in living mannequins, symbolizing how patients can be reduced to mere objects under clinical detachment. Like the school was meant to be a place of nurture, a hospital is meant to be a place of healing. Yet here, we see it as a place of horror and harm, with medicine used as a vehicle for control and fear. And it is also in this chapter with the Doctor that Mono and Six take their next, much greater step towards the total disintegration of their morals. Firstly, we witness Mono pulling the plug on a patient's life support, and then we watch the pair of them trick the Doctor into entering an incinerator. Six then slams the door shut, and Mono burns the Doctor alive. Coming in next, the viewers, and these are an unsettling look at just what happens to people that fall under the systems at play. They are largely passive, but an unsettling sight, just don't turn off the TV. They will sit, stand or kneel in front of televisions as Mono explores Pale City, completely besotted with the broadcast output by the signal tower. They will watch TV through cracks in doors while having a bath or even while standing out in the pouring rain. If the broadcast is interrupted or stopped, they will go completely off the rails. They will become aggressive, wander into electrified water, smash their heads into screens, and even hurl themselves off ledges to try and get to a working TV. The end result is they become so obsessed, so dependent on the broadcasts, they will watch to the end, till death itself. The viewers represent a society that has culturally and psychologically collapsed. They symbolize the loss of individuality and agency through mindless media consumption, standing as haunting reminders of a society numbed into apathy and silence by constant screen exposure. They no longer have any will or greater purpose beyond merely consuming what the signal tower conveys to them, resorting to self-destructive impulse without its divine guidance. They are stuck in a permanent state of distraction, and this society is so dependent on this media that they resort to aggression when not fed it. From Mono's perspective, these adults seem distant, uncaring, and frightening. They are present but emotionally and mentally gone. Their blurred faces remove any sense of individuality and instead make them look uniform, lost to the system that he wants no part of. It's quite clear to see this kind of phenomenon is very present in our own lives. I draw the connection again to how long we spend checking our phones and computers for the next piece of content we are dying to consume. Anything to escape the real world and the depressing, repetitive boredom that comes with it. The 9 to 5, the bills to pay, war, economy worries, global warming, population decline. No wonder we crave distraction, and I for one am both guilty of consuming and creating this content. Also, maybe as a result of being actively involved with the death of the Doctor, Mono by this point seems undeterred at taking life as a means to an end, and is involved in the deaths of a few of the viewers in this part of the story. A similarity maybe to Six's untrusting survival above all else instincts, and another grim reminder of Mono's growing moral ambiguity. And finally we come to the Thin Man, the final boss. As we already know, this is Mono, but all grown up, in a smart suit and a fedora instead of a bag, and looking remarkably like Slender Man, it must be said. The Thin Man's existence and power are shaped by the Tower's broadcasts. He will pursue Mono through Pale City, using TVs to teleport through, just like Mono, and distort his surroundings in the process. The Thin Man is both victim and servant of the Signal Tower. The Thin Man is victim because he is Mono, corrupted by its influence, and also servant because his whole purpose is to guide Mono towards the tower to become the Thin Man. He does this directly by pursuing him physically towards the tower, but also by corrupting and manipulating Mono's character, such as when Mono is forced to confront him. The Thin Man also abducts Six, setting up the later event where Mono is forced to destroy Six's music box, which then results in Six betraying Mono, ultimately cycling back to the creation of the Thin Man. The existence of the Thin Man, and knowing what we know about his origins, are a paradox, and also a symbol of just how far gone this city has become. Cause and effect, past and future, are breaking down. A future version of Mono is pursuing himself, and his future actions are affecting his present day. By the end of Mono's journey, the system he has been trying so hard to escape has in fact taken him too. He becomes the monster in his own story. Mono removes his bag, a symbol of his anonymity, or maybe he just gives up, and accepts he cannot keep running from the system, and is forced to use his own signal manipulating abilities to defeat the Thin Man, foreshadowing his transformation from the sweet, innocent boy at the start to a corrupted entity with morals in tatters, using the very system he tried to escape to his own benefit. An honourable mention goes to the Flesh Wall, or the Eye Monster, whatever you want to call it. At first glance, its symbolism points to surveillance, all those eyes watching an uncomfortable Mono. But if we take into account everything we know about the Signal Tower and the viewers, a darker picture emerges. All those eyes could be what's left of the viewers, no longer people, just raw material fused into a single faceless identity, which explains why the viewers do not have eyes. The eyes are here watching the broadcast. They exist only to watch. Some have also suggested the Flesh Wall is just a mass of forgotten, voiceless individuals swallowed whole by the system, their obsession and suffering reflected back onto Mono as the nightmare made flesh. This is supported by all the empty sets of clothes we see lying around, suggesting these were people that were taken by the signal to become one with the Flesh Wall. Either way, it's very unsettling. Also, the imagery of Mono sitting on the chair alongside it all reinforces his acceptance of his fate. He has no choice but to join everyone else who fell to the system. So, is there more to the villains of Little Nightmares? Absolutely. They aren't just monsters, they're mirrors, distorted, yes, but showing us something real. Gluttony, vanity, control, obsession, fears we pass down, cycles we're all part of. Little Nightmares doesn't just scare us, it shows us the world as children might see it. Dark, towering, and quietly monstrous. You can support me on Ko-Fi and check out this video for another great story. Please leave a like and subscribe if you made it this far, big up the patrons, and special thanks to Viger, Zahex, and Andre Bechert.